Let's get started with our project today. Go to Xcode and create a new application. Xcode, new project, single view app. We'll call it UIKit animations. And we'll click next, and we'll say create. Great. Since this week we're focusing on programmatic UI, we'll go ahead and we will update our info plist. So we'll click on our info plist. We'll go ahead and remove the storyboard file from the info plist. We'll remove it. We'll go ahead in the application scene manifest, and we'll also remove the storyboard name here by clicking on the minus sign. Great. We'll run our app. Yeah, we need to delete the storyboard as well. Thank you. So lastly, we'll go ahead and delete the storyboard file from our navigation project. Remove the storyboard file, move to trash, and run the app again. If everything went successfully, we should have a black screen showing in our app. At this point, we're on our own to go ahead and set up the UI we want. Right? Again, at this point, we're on our own to set up the view hierarchy. Any questions? Anybody not up to that point? We're good? Okay, perfect. So now we'll go over to our scene delegate, and we're going to the scene delegate with the sole purpose of setting up the main view controller for our application. So we go to the scene delegate to set up the main entry point for our first view controller. To get that started, we will go ahead and get a window scene. And again, the scene delegate is new in iOS 13. iOS 12, that same code, you would have to do it in the app delegate in iOS 12 and before. So here we have our window object. We need to give it a frame. We'll use the frame property, which accepts a CGRect. So the CGRect has 4 values, an X and Y, and a width and a height. For that, we'll go ahead and use UI screen, which will be the entire device's size and width. So UI screen.main.bounds. So at this point, our window will take up the entire device's space. Next, we'll go ahead and set up the window scene, associate the scene delegate with this window, or associate the window with this scene delegate by using the window scene property. Next, we need to give our window a root view controller. To test, we'll go ahead and give it the view controller here. And next, finally, we need to present the window, and we need to make the window the key window of the application. So with that, we'll say window.make key and visible. So set that window as the main window and show it on screen. So those are the steps. And finally, the last step we'll do, we'll give our view controller some background color. So view.background color. Going back a little bit, you missed a step? Okay. And after that step, go to the view controller in view did load and give it some background color. What we're doing is just testing right now to make sure our view controller is getting rendered. correctly. So I run my app, and you should see the background color that you chose. It's a view controller. It's not embedded in anything. It's just a plain vanilla view controller, and the only thing we're doing is giving it some background color to confirm that indeed it is the view controller being called here. Great. Okay, so we spoke about UI tab controller. Last week, we subclassed UI tab controller. We'll be very similar doing the same thing today. We'll subclass UI tab controller, and we'll set up the child view controllers in the subclass of UI tab controller. The only difference will be difference from storyboard from Friday to now is instead of saying view controller on line 36, whatever the subclass we created, we will pass it there, right? So that will be the root controller, the root view controller of our application, okay? So first, let's go create a tab controller subclass. So Command N, it's a Cocoa Touch class. It's a subclass of what class? UI tab controller, very good. So UI tab bar controller, and we'll call this animations tab controller. Animations tab controller, subclass of UI tab controller, and we'll press next and create. Awesome. So we're now in the subclass of the UI tab controller. There is a viewDidLoad function here. Whoa, sorry. Okay, so we have one viewDidLoad. Let's give it a color here. So view.background color equal to green. I'm in the subclass of my UI tab controller. I give it a background color. And now let's go make that tab controller the root view controller. So we'll go back to the scene delegate. Instead of saying view controller here, what are we saying? Animations, very good. I run the app again. And we have green. Everybody? Right? We have green, we have no tabs, but we have a tab bar, right? Everybody should see the tab bar here. Great. Making progress. Very good. Let's just go ahead and delete the view controller. The one that just says view controller, delete it. If you don't have the color, did you change it here in viewDidLoad for animations tab controller? Yeah, delete the view controller, the one that came with the project. How you doing, Mel? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll have two tabs. Our tab controller will have two tabs. We'll have a first tab and a second tab. The first tab, we'll call it Pulsating Animations Controller, and the second one, we'll call it Constraints Animation Controller. So let's go ahead and create two new classes. So new file, Cocoa Touch class. First one, we'll call it Pulsating View Controller. It's supposed to be a UI view controller. Thank you. Actually, let's just call it sample animations here. Call it sample animations controller. Sample animations controller. And it's a subclass of UI view controller, not UI tab controller. UI view controller. Press next. Create. And we'll create one more. New file. Cocoa Touch class. And this one we'll call constraints animation controller. Constraints animation constraints animation controller. Tiffany? The very first one we created.
The very first one, that's the root view.
Yes.
Is a UI tab bar controller, and then we create a class for that tab bar controller.
Yes, we did. We called it animations tab controller.
That's fine, and then that's what we put inside of
The scene delegate.
yeah.
Yeah. And at this point, we'll click next here. We'll say create. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, let us do some changes. In our sample animations controller, give it a color of your choosing. We'll call this view background color. I'll say yellow here. So sample animations controller, give it a color. And also our constraints animation controller, give it a color as well. Cool, great. So each controller has a different color, right? So when we tab, we know it's changed for sure. Great. Next step, let us go back to our tab controller. We'll remove that green color. We don't need that here. In the tab controller class, no color. And the only thing we're doing here is set view controllers for the tab bar. In our app, we will have 2 tabs, right? Say that again? Yeah, we just removed it because each controller has its own background color. So set up view controllers. How do we set that up? Anybody recall from last Friday? I'll take a second. We'll look at our notes and we'll get an answer. So what are we looking at? We're looking at our scheduler app from last Friday. We subclass UI tab controller, and we did some setup in the view did load. So how did we assign those view controllers? Tanya, are you looking at your app?
We made
Cassandra? What's the array called? View controllers, right? And then we assign it whatever we want, right? It's an array. Part of anything we do is go back to the lab we done before, right? Like image picker, for example, we did image picker. Image picker has, I would say maybe 70% of the photojournal lab, it does. The only thing we have to change is give it an extra view controller, put some elements in there. That's it, really, right? So like part of programming, you've seen something somewhere, go back to what you did before and put it into your project, right? And then knowing where to get it is important. Cool? Everybody? Awesome. So here we have our array. Our array accepts view controllers. So whatever I'm putting into that array needs to be a view controller. So for now, we'll say sample view controller, and we will say constraints view controller. And those needs to be instances. That's why I have open parens, close parens. They need to be instances of the view controller. We'll come back, we'll refactor this, but now I just want to test. We're just testing right now. So I run the app. And our first view controller is yellow. If I click on my second or the left side of the bottom bar here, well, didn't change here. What's happening? Are both of them yellow? That'll do it. So make sure they're not both the same color, right? Okay, Friday blues. Make sure they're not both the same color. So run it again.
So just so I'm sure, we made two other view controllers. We deleted the view controller that came with the project, and we made two view controllers. One was called sample animation view controller. The other one is called
Constraints.
Constraints view controller.
Yeah. All right, so here, first is yellow, which makes sense because sample animations is yellow. Everybody? My next one should be red if I click on the bottom tab, and it is red, right? So our tab bar controller pretty much works, right? So we set it up in the sim delegate, we subclassed it. This is the second time we're doing that, right? So muscle memory, I really want us to start building that muscle memory. I've seen this thing before, where have I seen it? That's why we're really trying our best to make sure our projects are named as appropriately as possible, and also the notes is appropriate as possible. So, yeah.
So from the view controller's array, that's how it knows it has two tabs?
Yes, exactly. So if I go back to the subclass, very good, here, this is how it knows it has two objects, right? So you could put in 3, 4, 5 is the maximum, really, right? Anything more than 5, you want to stop. Right? And then think of the architecture again. Cool? So that's how we set up our tab bar. Right? We subclassed it because here we want to give it more information. We want to do everything in code. So we subclassed it, and in the view did load, we set the view controllers. You have two view controllers, Mr. Tab Controller. The first one is sample, which would be index 0. And the second one is constraints animation, which would be index 1. Cool? Great. All right. So since we have our project set up, we could continue on. Actually, let's get in the habit of committing too. So let's go source control, because we've done a big change here. So let's go source control, create get repositories. I'm creating a local repository. Then I'm going over to my source control navigator. I'm right-clicking on my project. I'm saying create UIKit animations remote. So it's going to create a get remote. And it's public. My description, I'll give it some description. I'll say add in a programmatic UI tab bar controller and working with UIKit animations. Okay, perfect. And it's public, and I go ahead and hit create. Awesome. So now my project is on GitHub. If I was to go over to GitHub here, click on my repos, and I click on my animations repo. So this is the repo we just created, right? If I do any change here, like if I do a README, for example, if I edit my README on my repo has been edited. What do I have to do in my Xcode project? I have to pull, right? Perfect. So let's go ahead and do that. So right in source control, I'll say pull, and everything is up to date. Perfect. Now we could continue on. So we'll set up our sample animation controller and our constraints animation controller. We need to give them tab items. When I say tab items, right now our app doesn't have an image for the tab, right? Like there's no image or a description of what the tab is. So right now the user has no idea of what the tabs are or even what's going on. There's like one big tab bar with no information. So let's go ahead and set that up. Again, very similar to what we did last week, but this time we're doing everything programmatic. Last week, how did we get the instances of the view controller? Last week, how did we get the instances of the view controller into our tab bar controller subclass?
We made, we created, wait, sorry, it's right here. We did, through data, we made a lazy bar.
Yeah, we made a lazy var, and then how did we get the instances of the controller? From the storyboard. We said instantiate with identifier,
Yes.
right? Very good. Right? Please, 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 immerse into the experience. All right, so let's go ahead and do so. So we'll create a private var here, and we'll call this one sample animations VC. It's of type sample animations controller. It's a view controller. Sample animations. And we return view controller. Great. And here we're not getting an instance from storyboard because there's no storyboard. But if you had a storyboard file, you could have done exactly what we did last Friday. Everybody? Does everybody know the project we're talking about when we're referring to last Friday? Right? It's a scheduler app?
Yes.
Okay. So here we have our sample animations controller. Great. Let's keep setting it up. Here we could give it the background color if we want, but that's fine. We'll keep that in the view did load. But we'll get it a tab item. So we'll say view controller dot tab bar item. The tab bar item is the item at the bottom of the tab bar, or what's on the tab bar. When you click on a tab bar, or when you see the image, a tab item has an image and it has a title associated with it, right? For example, you could have a search magnifying glass with the word search at the bottom. Everybody? So that's what we're referring to with the tab item. Very similar to a UI bar button item, there's a tab bar item. So we set up the tab bar item here. We'll say UI tab bar item. And there's several initializers. We'll use the initializer that has the tag with the image and the title. So the last one, right? So UI tab bar item, title, image, and tag. That's the one we're using. So go ahead, press enter here. For the title, we'll simply call it sample animations. For the image, we'll say UI image. And we'll use a system image. We'll use one.circle. And for the tag, we'll associate it with 0, right? We'll associate the first tab with 0 tag, and the second tab with 1. Very good. So that's good. Next, let's go off to creating our second one. So lazy var constraints animation VC is of type constraints animations VC. View controller. And right, just to remind us, this view controller doesn't know about this view controller instance. There are different instances, different scope. Everybody? This is local to this private lazy var, okay? So we could redefine it here with the same name. All right. Next up, we have constraints, animations controller. Again, this is a clean initializer. There's nothing in there. We're not getting it from storyboard. And next, we'll just say return view controller. And let's go ahead and set up the tab bar item. So view controller dot tab item equal to UI tab item and title. Title will say to.circle image UI image. Oh, I did that a bit wrong here, sorry. So system name is to.circle. And our tag is 1, and this is not to.circle. This is constraints. Cool. And instead of using this sample animation here, we'll use the instance we just created. So sample animations, and this guy becomes constraints animation. Tag 1, yeah, tag 1. Thank you. So we created 2 lazy vars. One is our first tab, the second is our second tab, and it's the same setup in our view controllers array, but this time we're using the actual instances we created. And remember, our view controllers array takes instances of view controllers. Yes?
Simple question. We gave them tag numbers already. So like, let's say you were to switch the order in which you put it into the array. Would the tag number take precedence of how it's ordered?
It would be, if you're switching it here, you'd have just to switch the tag as well, just to keep it consistent. It would still have the same tag. It wouldn't be, so if I switch constraints to the first, it would still have tag 1.
That's what I'm saying. So it will still show up
Yeah.
properly.
It would show properly, but the tag would still be the tag that you set it up with.
No, I'm saying.
Like if I did this, what would constraints tag be?
It should still be 1, no?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes? Is there a reason I come across, which, this guy? Here? You could camel case it, that's fine, like they did here. It's just, right? You could camel case it, it's fine. All right, so we have 1.circle, 2.circle. Let's go ahead and see what our app looks like. Where's my 2.circle? Oh, it's spelled wrong. Ha. Circle. I feel like that should be a crash when it doesn't find the thing. Okay, so we have our tab bar with our sample animations showing up as the title for the first tab, and 1 circle, right? 1.circle is the image. And if I click on my second tab, I have my constraints animation showing up as the title, and I have the 2.circle showing up as the image. Cool? Great. So we saw UI tab bar controller subclass twice, right? Awesome. So we could actually use that in our lab with the weather app. To the viewed load. I changed, what we had earlier was the open parents, close parents, but now we're using the instances we created. So make sure you updated that. Other than that, you won't have the tab bar items. Any questions about what we just did with setting up our tab bars? Okay, great. Let us start off with our first animation then. Let's get an image going on here. Image, image, image. Okay, I slacked out our first image. Let me go ahead and add it to my assets folder. Go ahead and add it to your assets folder as well. So we have a Pursuit logo here. We'll go ahead and we'll add that Pursuit logo to our launch image. We haven't dealt too much with the launch screen, sorry. So we'll go ahead and we'll set up our launch screen on our storyboard. So click on your launch screen, that storyboard here. Click on your launch screen, that storyboard. Click on your launch screen, that storyboard. And let's go ahead and get an image view into our launch screen. Okay. Let's set up the constraints for it. So first we'll make it center horizontally and vertically in container. Then we'll go ahead and make the width half the width of the device. So I'll control drag to my super view, and I'll select equal width. I'll go over to my size inspector, and I'll edit equal width to be 0.5. Next, I will change the aspect ratio of the height. So I want it to be 1:1. So I'll control drag from the image view to itself, right? Control drag from the image vertically to itself, and I'll select aspect ratio, right? So aspect ratio, and I'll also go edit my aspect ratio. So aspect ratio, I'll click on edit, and I'll change my multiplier 1:1. So my multiplier will be 1:1.
I think we lost speech.
Okay.
You said horizontally, vertically, and container first. Right, and then you went over to your identity.
Let's redo it. Let's redo it. Okay. First, we get an image view over to our device, center. Then we set the horizontal and vertical constraints to be center. So horizontal and vertical, center. Then we control drag from the image view, over to the super view, equal width. We edited our equal width to 0.5, exactly 0.5. We press enter. Then for the last step, we said we want the height to be the same as the width. So for the height to be the same as the width, we control drag from the image view itself, vertically, and we select not height, but aspect ratio. And lastly, we go edit what the aspect ratio is. We edit aspect ratio, and we make it 1:1, and we press enter. Great. See that? And then we click on our image view. We go to the attribute inspector for our image view, and we select Pursuit logo. And that's what we should have.
I feel like I made it 1:1, and the image view didn't get bigger.
Do we all have our Pursuit logo? Perfect. Let's go ahead and run the app again and see if we see that logo showing. Doesn't show, right? Did anybody see it show? Okay, so you might have to delete your application. So go to the desktop, or not desktop, go to your Springboard and delete the app. If yours shows, that's fine. If it doesn't show, delete the application.
Where is it supposed to show?
So delete the app if it does not show, and run the app again. We saw it, right? So if I run it again, it should keep showing at this point, right? See it? And it's gone, right? So that's the launch screen, right? Many questions we get, I want to animate when I launch, right? I want to launch my screen and I want to have some animation. So this is where we'll start our animations today, right? So as it launches, you can't animate the launch screen itself. Like the launch screen doesn't have a class associated with it. Everybody? That storyboard launch screen, storyboard, does not have an associated class. There's nobody that's controlling it. So what we'll do in our first controller, which is the sample animations controller, keeping with programmatic UI, we'll go create a sample animation view, and then we'll have a logo on that as well, and then we'll animate that logo. Everybody? Cool. So let's go create a new file. So create a new file. Create a new file. It's subclass of what? UI view, right? And we'll call it sample animation. Sample animation view. Sample animation view. Sample animation view. Okay. Click next. Click create. And we're in our UI view class. Okay. We'll do the usual setup here. We'll say init with frame, super init with frame. And we'll also set up our required init, super init with coder. And we'll have our private func common init. So we've been doing that setup all week. Now let's see what a code snippet looks like. So we've been writing that same boilerplate code all week, right? So wouldn't it be nice to like write a shortcut text and then the thing just appears when you press enter, right? So that's what we'll do right now. We'll create what's known as a code snippet. If there's some code you regularly write, you could write a code snippet for it. And very similar to when you're in an extension, for example, and you type in item size, you just press enter, right? It will be very similar to that. So when we're ready, when we all typed out here, we'll create a code snippet. Okay, so to create a code snippet, the fastest way really is to highlight what you want to create. So control drag, not control drag, just drag over what you want to create, mouse click down, and select what you want to create the code snippet of, and right click on it. Right click on it, do we see it says create code snippet? So click on create code snippet. And here you get to give it a name. We could say create custom view. Create custom view. And the big part, the most important part here is that completion. Do we see where it says completion? Completion is that thing that you will remember very easily. right? That shortcut that you'll remember very easily. You don't want to put something there where it's hard to remember, right? Think about it like your password. Well, not your password, but something easy that you remember. Well, again, not your password. But so here I'll just simply say create custom view. I'll say create custom view.
Is there a reason why you're not camel casing?
Yes, I don't want to have spaces in there. Up to you if you want to put spaces.
No, she said camel case.
Oh, no reason exactly. This is not exact. There's no code review there. Just keep it as simple as possible. Camel case, that's what you're typing in. And I never tried it with camel case actually. That might be. I don't think it's case sensitive, hopefully. Okay, so here I have create custom view and I press done. And I get out of this and I delete all my code. Right, we want to test it. And I'll type in create.
Okay, that's cool.
Right?
You can do that for any code snippet?
Yes.
Are you serious?
Wait,
You mean to tell me
Wait.
that after the
You have to create muscle memory before you go to the shortcut, guys.
You're right. You're right.
I didn't show that Monday because of this reason.
You're right.
Right? On your whiteboard, you can code snippet, right? Can I what? Kelby? Thank you, sir.
I was just wondering, since there's no like outlets being used in this, will that that won't interfere?
Yeah, there's no outlets, but you could have outlets as well if that's something that
So,
you...
like, say you wanted to rename your class now.
You would just rename it now.
Is this
Yeah, exactly. Or you just rename it right here. That's all you have to do. Just rename that one thing.
Is this localized to just list?
To the Xcode. So it's in your Xcode preferences, everybody. Think about... Question was, is it only to this project? No, it's Xcode. It's associated with your Xcode. Very similar to like a user defaults.
So this is here from now on?
Yeah, unless you delete your Xcode.
That, what do you mean? Unless you delete the snippet, or
Unless you delete your Xcode version. All right. You could basically go to, good question here. Where's my code snippet thing here? Just click on the plus. You see the plus icon right there? And then just go to the thing and edit it. What's the question? You could edit it whichever way you want. Whatever that's easier for you. Yeah.
Is that what it means when it says availability all scopes?
Yes. Okay, so we saw code snippet today. That's good. Awesome. Thank God we don't have closed book programming, right? It's like code snippet the whole solution. All right.
Oh, imagine, I never thought of that.
Right.
I never thought about that.
Okay, let's continue on. What are we building? We are building something very similar to the launch image. We want a square center, width, half of the device, height, same as the width, and then we'll place the Pursuit logo there. Let's go ahead and build that. We'll start off here with public, lazy var, we'll call it Pursuit logo of type UI image view. And it is an image view, UI image view, return image view. Okay. And we'll set up our constraints for it. Private func setup Pursuit logo constraints. And here, what are we doing? We're gonna add subview Pursuit logo. We'll say Pursuit logo. We are using auto layout. we are using auto layout, so we set auto resizing mask to false. And then lastly, we'll go ahead and set up our constraints for the logo. So we'll start off by saying ns constraint layout activate. And we'll start off with the X and Y first. So we'll say pursuit logo dot center X is equal to center X. And we'll say pursuit logo dot center Y constraint is equal to safe area layout guide dot center Y, no constant. Don't forget our comma here. Do I have the same here? This should be Y, and this should be Y. And this is X, this is X. Then we'll go over to the width. So we'll say pursuit logo width anchor constraint equal to some constraint with some multiplier. So here we want to be the width. We want to be constrained to the width, and the multiplier will be 0.5. And lastly, we want our height to be the same height as our width. So we'll simply say height anchor constraint equal to my own height, my own width, sorry, like this. And we'll make sure to call setup constraints. So center X, horizontally centered here, and center Y, vertically centered. And we're using the safe area layout guide. So we centered, if there's any bars there. And we say the width anchor, we want it to be 50% of the width of the device. And the height anchor will be the same as the width. So here, it's a square. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And lastly, let's go set up our image. We didn't add the image yet. Multiplier 0.5. Oh no, the height doesn't have a multiplier. The height is equal to the width. Because there's bars there. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's make sure we set our image. So image view dot image is UI image. What's the question? Question? Pursuit logo. So don't forget to add your image here.
Wait, did you make the view equal to this? Well, you're not.
I haven't done it yet. No, we haven't added the view to our controller. Everybody has the constraint set up? No. No. Okay.
What's it called? Dash logo.
If we have bars, we want to center it between the bars. It might have at some point where we put a nav bar. We might embed them in nav bars. How are we doing with the constraints? We good? The image is set to Pursuit logo here.
Is it named, right? Not system name, right?
No, we're using the same logo we have in our assets. Verify that you have the assets logo here, right? Pursuit logo. Okay, now let's go out to our view controller and add it. In our view controller, we have our sample animations view equal to sample animations view. And we get our load view, and we say view equal to our sample view. Okay. Let's run it and see what we have. We have nothing. Let's make sure we call everything. Go back to our animations. Go back to our animations view. We haven't called common init here. And if coming from storyboard, remember, again, this is only coming from a storyboard. Only coming from storyboard. This won't get called. Like, as we run our app right now, this function, this initializer doesn't get called. But if you add your view to a storyboard file, then it will get called. Everybody? All right, so make sure that you call in your common init here, because common init is the one setting up our constraints and adding our subview. Sample animations controller. We need to change our content mode. That's good. So change your content mode to aspect fit. It's funny, they're inconsistent. The defaults. In storyboard, the default is aspect fit. In code, the default is aspect, is scale to fill. Right, you see the difference here? Like if I run the app, you see like a stretch out the image. So let's go change that. In our sample view here, let's change our content mode in code, which we probably haven't done yet. So content mode, aspect fit. Yeah. Aspect fit. Cool. How are we doing? Everybody got the image on the first tab? Go back to the sample controller. Okay. Aspect fit.
Like that aspect fit?
Yeah. So image view dot content mode equal to that aspect fit. Is that same attribute we changed in storyboard? Okay, cool. While we're here, we could do stuff. Why am I just standing around? Okay, so let's implement view did appear, super.view did appear. I want when the view, not loading, like I don't want to miss my animation, When the view did appear, when it's on screen, I want to start my animation. Everybody with me? So what I want to do, I want to scale. Scale means to make it grow or shrink. I could scale up or I could scale down. I want to scale my image with a constant or some number. I want to scale it as big as possible. So we'll have a big value to scale the image like it's blowing up in our face, right? So that's our first animation we'll see today. A scale animation with a transform. Back in mathematics, we had transformations on different views, right? You want to move something with a transformation, you translate something. Like x, you move it from 0 to 100, right? You want to scale something up, you increase the x value and the y value. If you want it to scale proportionally, both values will be the same, right? So transform has scale. You could scale a transform. You could make it bigger, whatever it is. You could translate it. You could move it from A to B, right? Everybody? Translate means to move. Everybody? And you could also rotate. You could rotate. I sent us a handy tool for conversion. I sent us a handy tool for conversion here. Let's talk about it real quick. This guy. So this is a nice conversion chart because we'll be dealing with pi in if we want to rotate something, you rotate it with radians. So for example, if you want to rotate something at 180 degrees, you don't say 180 degrees, you say dot pi. Pi, right? We all remember pi here? So that's a good conversion chart for what you want to rotate. Just keep that handy if we get to rotation today, right? So if you want to rotate something 180, it would be dot pi. It would rotate it 180. It rotated in the z plane, or it's not a rotation around the x or the y. That's like core animations. We'll get to core animations later in the program. But it was just rotated around the device screen itself. Yes?
So you mean like these are the values that we would use if we wanted to?
Rotate at some degree. Radians to degrees. So pi is 180.
But the decimals is what we would be able to put into our code.
No, pi.
Oh, we could actually put.
Yeah, like dot pi. There's a dot pi CG float. Yeah. Yep. You came to a good world here. You could put 2 dot pi. Yes, you could multiply as well. You could say pi divided by 2. If you want something to rotate 360, there's a bit of a glitch there that you have to do something else to make it work. Because if you try to rotate it like 2 pi, you'll not see anything, right? You won't see anything at all. So you kind of have to do 180 and then do 360, right? But we'll come to all that. But just make sure you have that chart very available to you as you're working with animations. Okay, so what do we want to do? Let's start off with our first animation here, and we will write a function for it. What do we want to do? We'll say private function. We'll say scale animation. Doesn't take any parameters. UIKit is very powerful. UIKit has a lot of cool animations built in it. There's also core animations. Core animations there's more 3D work with core animations. Like if you want to make things rotate around an x-axis or y-axis in a 3D fashion, core animation has a lot of tools for that. But to get started, UIKit has a lot available to it. Later in the program, we'll revisit animations with core animations and UI view property animator. There's more animations there, right? But for now, we'll use UIKit animations today. And what do we want to do here? You want to start off by saying, we want a simple animation. So we'll start off by saying UI view. It works on the view. It's a static class. Dot animate. And as we see, there's many ways to animate things. We'll start off with the first simplest animation. Animate with duration, and it takes in the animation. Whatever you want to animate, what can you animate? You could animate the bounds of an object. You could animate the position of an object. As we said, Transform has a lot of cool ways to do things. In our example, we want to transform or we want to scale our image. We want to make it grow, right? So we'll use the animation with duration. With duration says, how long do I want this thing to animate for? Is it half a second, which would be 0.5? Is it 1 second, which would be 1.0? Is it 3 seconds, which would be 3.0, and so forth, everybody? And the animation's closure, it takes in a closure. In that closure, this is where you put the thing that's being animated, right? Meaning it could be a color. You could also animate colors or transition between colors. Anything you want to apply to your view that is animatable, right? It could be animated. You would put it in the animation block, right? So if you want to animate, for example, the center of an object, you would put that center equation in the animation block, right? So whatever you want to animate goes in the animation's closure, and the duration is whatever time you want it to animate for, right? Cool? From 0 to whatever that number is. So time interval here, we'll start off with 0.3, a third of a second. And we have our closure, which takes in the block of animation we want. And here we'll say, what do we want to do? We have self here. We have the name of our view, which is sample view. On it, we have our pursuit logo. And we said we want to transform it. So on a view, you have a transform property, which takes in a core graphics affine transform initializer. So we'll go ahead, we'll transform, and it takes in a CG affine transform. And as I said, what can we transform? We could transform the rotation, meaning the angle, if you want to rotate something at some axis. You could transform the scale of it. You could make it shrink and grow beyond its size. You could also move. You could move an X value, you could move a Y value. Say you want to make something move diagonally. You could move X and Y proportionally, right? So here we'll scale. If you say scale 1.0 to 1.0, anybody knows what's going to happen? Nothing, right? Because 1.0 is what's known as its identity. Let's put that down actually. So a scale, well, any transform value. Any transform value of 1.0 represents the identity of the object, or of the view, right? So if I want to transform it to 1.0, 1.0, it won't do anything, as Greg says. But here, if you want it to expand, am I increasing or decreasing the value, Yulia? Increasing the value. So let's have some big numbers here. We'll say 10 and we'll say 10. We'll make it grow proportionally. So we'll grow Y and we'll grow X at the same rate. And again, what's the syntax for our animation block? That's it. UI view dot animate with duration. With duration is the duration or the length of the animation. Here it's a third of a second.
What's the longest that we can work for?
It depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? Animation should be subtle as possible, meaning it shouldn't overwhelm the user. So an animation like that, if you make it for 10 seconds, the user will be very annoyed, right? So you want to make it visible, but at the same time, not too long on the screen. And how long can you do it for? As far as like the max of it, you could go infinity, right? But again, it's what you're trying to achieve. But animation should be as subtle as possible. When you're starting with animations, it's good to try to be fancy, but we've used apps where animation could be overwhelming. You don't want the animation to be overwhelming. Like Instagram, for example, you click on a heart, it gives you a small animation. That's it. Nothing crazy, nothing overwhelming. It lets the user know some activity happened. The what? You made that? Nice. All right, so let's go ahead and call our scale animation right here. And let's run our app again. Right? It animates it, but now we want to animate it and fade it away. Or we could also slow down the animation. Let's make it really annoying for now. Animation is something you could play. You have to play around to tweak it, right? Here the thing is animating really slowly. We could make it animate even bigger here. 8 seconds. Right? So really and truly, it's up to you, the designer or the developer, to figure out what animation effect you're trying to go for. Everybody? Right? So here, you could also animate the alpha of it. So here, we could put in some alpha here. So set, where am I? Sample animations view, dot pursuit logo, dot alpha. Anybody remember what alpha is? Right, and what's the default alpha value? 1. So if you want to make it fade away, what am I adding here? 0.
But it'll still be there.
It's still, we didn't add it to the sub view. It's part of its view, it's just not shown, right? All right, so this is a bit slow, right? We agreed? What do we want? 3 seconds? It's a little better. Okay, we could even make it faster. We could make it 1.5 here. All right, I would say that's better here. Okay, cool. Let us do, any questions? Again, you could animate background colors, you could animate corner radiuses. There's a lot of things you could animate, right? Let's just list some of the things we could actually animate here. Properties. We could animate. We have alpha, corner radius, position, center. You could animate a transition. Color, shadow, opacity, you could transform animate, meaning you could scale, you could rotate, you could translate. Okay. Let's do one more animation here. We'll make it rotate 360. We'll add some view. We'll make it rotate once 360. Let's see what that looks like. All right. Say it again. UI, you mean animate? It's a static, it's a class method of UI view, yeah. You're not creating an instance of it. Actually, let's make it, let me add one more here. Let's add one more before we continue. So we have our scale animation. We could add some sort of pulsating animation. Pulsating animation. I was under what? Actually, let me take this out and put it down here. I was on the transition here, color, background color. And right here, we'll add an next animation, pulsating animation. We'll test this out, and we'll say UI view dot animate with duration. Actually, we'll change this. It's animate with, give me a second here. I'm trying to get to the right one. My screen is a bit big here. No. Maybe the third one. Can see anything? Okay. So go ahead, type in animate and select the third choice. It should have options in there. Do we see, come on. Animate, where is it? Here. Choose the one that says animate with duration, delay, options, animations, and completion. You should see it better on your screens because you have more space here. My preferences, my font size is pretty big. I can't see what I'm trying to get after. But animate with duration, a delay with options. Do we see that? Okay, so let's create an animation here. We'll say duration is 0.3. We'll not give it a delay. A delay is, am I waiting for something? Am I waiting for X amount of seconds before I start my animation? Everybody? Options, we'll give it some options. It takes in an array, but for now, our options will be empty. And our animations block will be very similar to what we had before. So animations block here. And this one also has a completion. And here you would put in code to be executed after animation is complete. So, believe it or not, you could have an next animation here if you want to. So after my animation completes, after 3 seconds, my completion block gets called. Everybody? Everybody? So the first one, this is where my animations happen. So animations block, my first animations happen. When that's done, the completion handler gets called. So there you could reset to some value, or you could also have an next animation there. Everybody with me? Okay, so here you could reset values. So options, you can reset views values. And you could also create a next animation. But be careful there. I wouldn't go beyond that. Like if I create one animation in a completion handler, I would stop. If you want to do a series of animations, there's other ways to achieve that, right? So if, I'll just put a note here. If you want to go beyond creating an animation in this completion handler, the better choice would be Animate Key Frames. Right? You don't want to chain completion handler, completion handler, completion handler, right? Stop and then look at animate keyframes. Animate keyframes, you could have you could have chain animations basically, right? You could have chain animations. Like my ball moves from left to right, then it moves from right up, then it goes from up back to left, and so forth. Everybody? Cool. All right. Yes? You can reset views value. So if I moved it at a certain place, I could make it go back, yeah. Or if I made the alpha, whatever, 0, I could reset that alpha to 1, for example. Yes, sir?
Your example of ball moving in
Yeah, exactly. So there's a closure. Well, there's a UI view animate keyframes, and then in there you add each keyframe. Yeah. So you could add as many keyframes as you want. Yeah. That would be more streamlined as opposed to like chaining completion handlers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But if you have one animation in the completion handler block, that's fine. Right? But if it's like, oh, I'm going to have a next UI view animate with duration that has a completion handler, and the next one that has a completion handler, you go to that pyramid.
So it's like simple versus complex.
Also that pyramid effect, and then yes, there's a built-in function for that, which animates with keyframes, which is better. Cool? Very good. Okay, so what do we want to do here? We want to create some pulsating effect, right? So we'll create it right here. It will be self dot sample animations view dot pursuit logo transform here, and CG affine transform, and we'll scale it again, and this time we'll scale it. Let's see what we want to do here. Scale it to 1.5, for example. And we'll have, right in our options here, you could have other options. Like you could say repeat this animation. You could say repeat the animation. You could also say auto reverse the animation, meaning repeat this animation, scale the thing, but go back to the original position, scale it again, go back to the original position, scale it again. So here we'll put in some options. And you see all the options we have a lot of options there. So animations is one of the things. The best way to grasp it is to play with it, because there's many different tweaks you could do, right? And the effect that you want to create. It's limitless, the things we could do. Okay, so here we say we want to repeat. And you put commas with more options, auto reverse. And as I said, right in our completion handler, we could put in UI view dot animate. This time, just animate with animations. We'll say 0.3. And here, we'll change it back to its default value. So we'll say self dot sample view dot pursuit logo dot transform. We want to go back to the original. If you want to go back to the original state, you want to go back to the identity of the thing. So you'll say CG affine transform dot identity. So that restores back to original state. Transform is a mathematical transformation, right? And transform has 3 different transforms on it. You could scale, meaning make it grow or shrink. You could move, meaning translate from 100 to 200. And you could also rotate. It's like matrices, right? When you have a matrix, you want to transform the matrix, the position or the scale. Okay. A manipulation of some sort on that view. And those are the 3 manipulation mechanisms we have. Okay, so we have, so instead of calling our scale transformation here, we'll call our pulsating animation. And as you see, there's many ways we could test it here. We could make different animations. We could spend days on it. It's beautiful. So let's run it. And here we have our pulsating effect. And that goes on forever. Right? Cool?
So we put repeat and then we put what else?
I put auto reverse.
Oh, which makes it go back.
Yep.
So if you just put repeat back.
It was, if you put repeat without the auto reverse, it will still shrink it because we have the code go back to identity. You see the one in the block? The code in the block that says identity. Yes, Matt? Did you call it in the video here? Did your first one work? Okay, did we get the first animation to work? The one that blew all the way up? Did we get the second animation to work? Okay, we'll take a break here and then we'll come back at 12 o'clock to do constraints. Okay, we'll take a break here, we'll stop here, and we'll come back and we'll do constrained layout.